Bonsoir, mesdames, messieurs. Bienvenue à l'Université Concordia. My name is Graham Carr. I'm the Vice President for Research and Graduate Studies, and it's terrific to see a full house here again for the second of 4 Thinking Out Loud conversations brought to you by Concordia University, the Globe and Mail, and the Concordia University Alumni Association. Now, Thinking Out Loud is meant to be a series of stimulating conversations on topics that matter to the public and that allow us at Concordia to connect some of the research that we do with topics that are of interest to you. And it's about getting beyond the sound bites, having a real conversation, digging a little bit deeper. And tonight, as you know, we'll be discussing sex, gender, theater, and politics. So I'm going to dispense with the rest of the introduction. I think we want to get straight to that. Please join me in welcoming tonight's moderator from the Globe and Mail, Erin Anderssen. And our conversationalists this evening, Professor Emer O'Toole from Concordia. And the incomparable Panti Bliss.
Enjoy. Professor.
Well, thank you again for being here tonight. I think we're going to have a great conversation. Maybe we'll start with a quote. The famous RuPaul's quote, which I noticed you both mentioned in your books, already out and coming out soon. And the quote is, "We're born naked and the rest is drag." How much do you agree with that statement?
I agree with almost all of it. It's funny, I only have one friend in Montreal, and he owns a fetish wear store. And he had a party last night, and there was all these leather queens at it. And I'm generally very comfortable in the company of leather queens because they're just drag queens. It's just a different kind of drag. And I think we're all performing drag at some level. We're all performing who you are. The person that you are in class is a different person to the person you are at home watching TV, eating sandwiches, to the person you are when you're trying to get an upgrade at the airline desk. So it's all a kind of drag.
Mm-hmm. And I suppose my answer to this question won't be as exciting as yours because I did not spend yesterday at a leather queen convention. But I suppose I'm interested in that quotation, or what I like about that quotation and why I put it in my book and why I was happy to see it in Panty's book, is that it really exposes the political potential of drag. And a lot of people can kind of dismiss that potential and think of it as just fun and just play. And of course it is fun and it is play, but also drag tells us that the costumes that we wear that are supposed to signify a kind of natural gender identity are really just that. They're really just costumes. And by playing with them, we expose the arbitrariness of those gender conventions and those gender roles. So there's a huge political potential, I think, in it, in terms of LGBTQ politics and feminist politics.
But Panty was mentioning all of the ways that we perform, like as daughters, as mothers, at work. Do you think that underneath that all, gender is the prevalent performance? Is that what's really influencing a lot of all the decisions we make?
Well, I certainly think it's one of the big ones. It's always interesting to me as somebody who spends a lot of time performing, a gender that wasn't given to me at birth, in a sense, is that it's how. And the word I always use is discombobulating it is to people. People are made uncomfortable by somebody who challenges their sort of simple assumptions about life or the simple boxes that they want to put people in. And so somewhere like Montreal, where I just feel like everybody is saying, "Hi, I'm Anne and these are my girlfriends." It's that kind of town. It might seem weird here that simply a man wearing a dress can really disturb people. But in most of the rest of the world, it disturbs people. It makes them question their sort of preconceived notions about things, and it can make some people very angry. And so in some cultures now you see that a lot, but then in other, more primitive cultures, for example, it was also seen as something magical. like the witch doctor and all that was often, what we would say he was a flaming queen, but you know, two-spirited and all of that sort of a third gender. So I think it has always been discombobulating or divine in some way.
I agree with Panty that, since my arrival here in Montreal about 18 months ago and realizing that everyone I met was a queer, polyamorous, anarcho-artivist yoga vegan. And, I realized that the way that I perform my gender identity, which is, shocking to some people in Ireland and even in London, is, really quite tame here, and I love it. I love being the most, the least interesting, least out there person in the room. It's really relaxing. But I think, the other part of that, of that coin, the other side of that coin is that absolutely in most places in the world, and of course in places in Canada, and of course in other places in Quebec, gender is really one of the structures that defines the kind of person that you can be. So from the second that, you're born and the doctor shouts, "It's a girl," that completely limits so many of your possibilities, and it's going to define how people are going to treat you, the kind of characteristics they think you have, and of course it's going to define the kind of person that you become. And I often wonder why, at a time when we're doing a lot of work to break down other kinds of prejudices and other kinds of binaries, that gender binary persists so strongly. And I have a theory. Would you like to hear it? So my theory is that often with other kinds of intersectional oppressions, let's say with like LGBTQ oppression, there's a community, and straight people aren't necessarily part of that community, and they might know one or two, but they don't think that they can speak for that whole community. But when it comes to gender, everyone has a sister, a partner, a wife, a girlfriend, a mother, a grandmother, and so they think they know women, and they think they understand the fundamental, natural elements of what it means to be a woman. Everyone has a gender, and so everyone thinks in a way that they're an expert on gender, and in a way they are. They're an expert on their own gender, but it can be hard to make people see beyond those boxes, those lines, those very clearly drawn but limiting pigeonholes.
Well, both of you have talked in your book about and have lived your lives in a way that is forcing people to see beyond those boxes. I mean, you tell some great stories, both of you, about the costs of that, both, and also the benefits of making people think differently. Can you share some of those experiences when you go against the gender performance that is expected of you, some of the responses that you've had and what you've learned about people from that?
Well, what I would say is sometimes people often are confused about what to call me, and they make big issues around it. And I have absolutely no problems. You can just call me however you feel comfortable with, because I honestly don't care. Although I do, it's odd, if I'm not dressed up, it does bother me if somebody, it doesn't bother me how you call me, but if I spend 2 hours getting ready, and I look like this, and somebody shouts, "Oh, hey, Rory," I'm like, "Fuck you," you've just pricked the whole thing that I've spent, this illusion that I spent ages working on, so it does bother me in that sense. But in general, I don't get hung up on it. But what I would say is so a lot of drag queens sometimes refer to themselves as female impersonators. And I never use that term because I don't feel like I'm impersonating a woman. Nobody in their right mind is going to confuse me for an actual, biological, bona fide, born and bred woman. Are they? And that's not what I'm trying to do. I'm not trying to convince anybody that I'm a woman. What I'm trying to do is present you something that is neither male nor female. That I'm trying to present something that is something else. It's something different. And sometimes, certainly first wave feminism used to sometimes, dismiss drag queens and say it was a sort of offensive parody of women, and recently it's been compared to blackface. And but I would say that I'm not impersonating a woman, I'm not parodying a woman, it's nothing to do with that. What I am doing, if I'm doing anything, is I'm parodying the tools of femininity, the tools that our culture decided that women have to use. Because our culture decided, and I keep saying our culture because it's not the same in every culture, but in our sort of Western culture certainly, women were told, you're the peacocks, and you are going to use these tools of peacockery, so you're going to use sequins and high heels and shove your tits out and, put your ass out and brush up your hair and use the makeup, that's all for you. And then they say to men, you are going to be gray and dull and visually uninteresting, and you're not going to use any of those things, and if you even put on a pink shirt, we're all going to look at you suspiciously. And that's going to be such part of your life that even if you're in a shop and you think, that's a nice pink shirt, and you'll think to yourself, oh, can I wear that because it might be a bit gay, and you'll put that shirt back down. We're going to police your gender that hard. And that is unfair on both men and women. It's unfair on men because they're expected to be constantly boring visually, and they're also expected to be emotionally dull and stoic and uninteresting. Men are expected to always, have a poker face and not show big emotions and all of those things. And that's bad for men's mental health. I mean, that's a whole other story. And women, on the other hand, it's bad for women because women are sort of expected and forced to use all of these tools of femininity, and if they decide not to, they're looked on suspiciously. Now, she's really tarted herself up for tonight, but if you're a woman, you think, well, actually, I don't want to bother wearing makeup, and I want to let my hair be as it is and all that. You're kind of looked on a bit suspiciously in our culture, like, what's wrong with her? There's something wrong with her, and she's definitely lesbian. That's the sort of attitude. So it's unfair on both genders. So if I'm doing anything, I'm parodying that. I'm saying, fuck you, I want to peacock for a bit, and I, like putting on all this stuff sometimes. Now, sometimes I don't, and I am lucky enough to have the freedom to be the boring guy, in an hour's time when we go to dinner or something if I want to. And women don't necessarily have that freedom. So on its base level, I'm not, trying to be a woman. But this is a roundabout way to answer your question, which was how people react to you. What I do think, though, is that our culture still treats women as the weaker sex. And for a man to dress in a woman in our culture is considered demeaning. He has demeaned himself, he has weakened himself. It's why it's seen as, like if rugby players get into drag with one of them, they pretend to be even worse at walking in heels than they really have. You're just walking on 2 inches, it's not hard, but they pretend they can't and they fall off, and, because they don't want to be seen to be any good at it, because being a woman is demeaning to them. But in this odd sort of corollary, sometimes if a woman makes her appearance a little more masculine, she gains more respect.
Yes.
Margaret Thatcher was, told to bring her voice down, and, female politicians wear boxy suits and, all that stuff. And we give a woman a little more respect if she seems less feminine. It's this odd, weird thing. But so people, strangers, will come up to me when I'm in drag, and they think, this guy has demeaned himself, and he won't judge me, because how can that judge me? That's what they basically think. So people will tell me in drag, intimate secrets, embarrassing things they may never have told anybody else, because they're sure that I won't judge them. Which, of course, is totally wrong, because I am judging. but that's what they think. So that's what I find. When I dress this way, people are much more open to me, because they're sure I'm not going to judge them.
But do you think, we're talking about women a lot here, but do you think the real change has to come when it's okay for men to dress how they want to? The guys in the office have started wearing these colorful socks as their, attempt to be, fashionistas. Yeah. But do you think that that's where the change really needs to happen, so that freedom? So a man's not seen as weak if he,
yes. I think that's part of it. I think that we need to develop both things. And in some ways, I'm torn about it. Because sometimes it's easier to be a man, to not really care. You don't have to worry that much about your makeup and your hair in the morning. And in some ways, it's much easier. And that's why some women want to, say, fuck all of that. And, so I'm torn about it. But I wish that everybody had the freedom to decide how they want to dress. Yes. And at the moment, we don't. Or you need to be a brave person to do it.
And it's about how you get there. Because it's not just, people judging you. It's you with your internalized ideas of how people judge people who act differently. And I think you're absolutely right that we still live in a symbolic system where the femme or the feminine is devalued. And a writer who I really like on this issue is Julia Serrano, who's written Whipping Girl and Excluded. She's a trans woman. And she talks about how as a femme woman within the LGBTQ community, often she's devalued because the kinds of femininity that are valued even in that kind of alternative space are often the more masculinized femininities. And that's again a replication of sexism even within those cultures. Now, as you noted, I did decide to tart myself up for this evening, but that was only because I realised that sitting next to Panty, I would look like a prudish Victorian gentleman no matter what I wore. And I've certainly played around with different kinds of gender significations and different kinds of gender presentation. And it's funny how what for me was so obviously a costume was read by so many people as a solid internal identity. So, like, I went from having long peroxide blonde hair to shaving my head, and it was amazing how suddenly I was socially gay. Immediately socially gay. And it was amazing how people who had always thought I was kind of sweet and like affable and amiable suddenly were quite frightened of me. A man pointed me out on the dance floor at a wedding, and he turned to another man and he said, see that girl over there? She's very attractive, but I kind of feel like she'd cut my balls off. To which the other man responded, that's my sister. And the other perhaps, disturbing thing about how people reacted when I shaved my head for the first time in Ireland was that they thought that there must be something wrong. They said, what's the matter? Like, they thought I'd become psychologically unhinged, and I tried to maybe allay those fears by smiling and laughing a lot, which I don't think actually aided my cause at all. I think, yeah. But it is strange how, when we act outside of the boundaries set for us by our biological sex, people actually think there's something wrong with us. They think we're ill if we don't adhere to these social norms, and that's really worrying and really strange.
But it comes down to the smallest of things. So we were laughing earlier because when I'm coming to do something like this, in comparison to doing like one of my regular shows, I think like, oh God, I'm going to a university, I'm talking, okay, they better take me seriously. So I think I'll wear straighter hair. Maybe I won't be so blonde. I won't do anything too platinum. I'll wear a day frock. Makeup. So even though I'm a giant cartoon here, I have modified this cartoon to be taken more seriously by you. Because even those small things. Because we were talking about Fox News presenters.
Yes.
There was a time when every female news presenter had, straight hair and shorter hair and was probably brunette. And, and I think looking at Fox News, you still have to look that way to be taken seriously, because Fox News ladies don't look that way.
No.
No. So even the tiniest things, it's so imbued in us.
Well, one of the things that both of you explore is this idea of choice, and when have we made a free choice? When are we being influenced? And sometimes it's kind of hard to tell. Like, Emer, you and I had a conversation about shaving your legs, and did I choose? I shaved my legs. Did I choose that? Am I being conscious of it? And you don't shave your legs, but so you've made a conscious choice. How do you balance that? How does that? Do you think we need to think more consciously about those choices?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, tonight I've chosen to pioneer stilettos and hairy legs.
It's a great look.
It'll catch on. I'm convinced. Like Da Vinci Catwalk 2016, stilettos, hairy legs. Trust me. I think often what happens when you ask someone, like, why do you? We're very interested in, trans identities, and we're interested in the identity of a drag queen. We're interested in the desire to cross-dress or the idea to inhabit a gender that isn't assigned to you at birth. But we're strangely much less interested in talking about the desire to be the same gender, to act in relation to the gender assigned to you at birth, to dress in the clothes of your own gender, which, when you think about it, is just as interesting a question. Why, when most girls are 14, 15, do they choose to have long hair? Do they choose to start experimenting with makeup, shaving their legs? And when you ask women, why do you choose this feminine gender presentation? Usually the answer you get, before people have had a chance to really think it through, it can be quite defensive, and it's my choice. I choose it, and. I'm not saying that free choice isn't a possibility, but I think within a coercive capitalist system, it's not a given. And if you grow up in society that, you know, in which every media image you've ever seen has been of beautiful women with shaved legs, and you've never seen a hairy armpit, and anytime you have, it has been as like some kind of hilarious, disgusting joke, and it implies that this person is slovenly and unhygienic and all of these things, then there isn't really a choice when you get to be 15. You don't think, oh, well, maybe I won't shave. That'd be cool. That'd get me a boyfriend. You know, I'll be prom queen. So I'm not sure that you can, I think that you need to interrogate the idea of those choices related to gender presentation in a coercive capitalist system, because they're not entirely free, obviously. And in my experience, when I stopped shaving, which, I mean, I'd done lots of gender bendy, you know, gender fucky stuff, and then I stopped shaving, and I went through this incredible psychological process of, I can't go out there, every time I wanted to leave the house in a dress. And I realized that the idea that I chose to shave was completely fictional. Like, it was so much psychological work to do the opposite that I realized that that was not a choice at all.
Well, we definitely, as you both of you talk about, when you are playing the game of of your gender, when you're performing your gender properly, you get a lot of rewards for that. And even you, Emer, talked about when your hair was long and you enjoyed the attention in your book of, you know, from men, and when you cut your hair short, you didn't get it, in a different way. So, I mean, I guess it's hard to think about, you know, in terms of our choices. Can we reach a point where we are making the decision for ourselves? Do you think we can get rid of all the noise around us and be conscious individuals about how we're performing our gender? Is that even possible?
Can I go first? Because I'll be really short. Right now, no.
No.
I agree with you. I think it's almost impossible to divorce yourself from the society around you. I think you have to be incredibly, you know, powerful individual to be able to throw off all of that stuff. And also, these are important questions beyond just being, you know, sort of intellectual masturbation. They're actually, they're important to your own safety in many ways, of course, depending where you are. Because what I, for example, people react differently to, you know, different gender expressions depending on how they perceive your reasons for doing it. So, for example, I feel entirely safe walking almost anywhere if what I'm wearing says, I'm a performing drag queen, I'm a clown, I'm here for entertainment, I'm on the way to do a show. People all understand that. And so people will sort of say, oh, that's a drag queen. And, you know, because you're covered in glitter and you've got big hair and whatever it is, people understand what I'm doing and what that is. But if you are, you know, a transvestite who's trying to look like your Auntie Marjorie, you know, that's your thing, and you're, you know, walking down the street in a pair of flats and a tweed skirt and whatever, that's much more dangerous. Or if you're a trans person, but you're not lucky enough to be the kind of trans person who passes easily, and you're, you know, you've been caught in that sense.
So if you go
that's
far
much
enough,
more dangerous.
then it's okay.
Yes,
But
if you've done it for a reason that they can understand, so they will understand, oh, that person is doing it as their job or for entertainment purposes. They understand what that is. But what they don't understand is, you know, what they see as a guy in a skirt. And that's when it's dangerous, because that discombobulates people to such an extent that you can get yourself in trouble. And I think society is the same on a larger scale.
But certainly, Panty, from your, you know, you talk about in the book about how maybe in hindsight or now you realize how subversive being a drag queen is and how it gives you a powerful platform. And certainly in Ireland, we were talking backstage about Panty Gate, which I'm not sure if the audience would know the whole story about that, but that's been about a year now. Can you tell us a little bit about what happened there? And, you know, looking back a year, has your idea of that changed? What?
Well, the briefest potted history. I was on a TV chat show, and during that show, a casual discussion about the nature of homophobia came up. And during that discussion, I named some people who are well-known commentators and journalists, and I mentioned a particular institute as, we're in Canada, and outside of our you know, Ireland's. And they were very upset, and they sued me, and they sued the national broadcaster also. And one thing led to another. It became a huge story at home because it was about how we treat gay people, but also became a story about free speech, about the role of the national broadcaster, about our defamation laws, all of these things. And in response to that, I made a speech which went viral on the internet and all of that. And that all became known as Panty Gate. It was discussed in the European Parliament, the whole
But do you think that moved people's opinions, that
it certainly,
that experience?
It started a conversation in Ireland that needed to happen and that hadn't really happened. We had this lazy kind of assumption that, the gays are grand. It's all fine, the gays, it's all fine. They're not being murdered in the street, so it's fine. That was the kind of lazy assumption. And so it started a conversation about that and how we actually treat the LGBT community. And I think it was well time we had that conversation. And looking back, I'm glad to have played any role in that, although it was entirely accidental that it happened. So what was the question then?
Well, I guess you're both from Western Ireland, right? And I think, is it this year they're having the referendum on same-sex marriage? So it seems like this topic has a certain urgency.
Well, actually, what your question really was, if I remember now, was it was about did the gender expression really play a role in all of that?
Oh, yes.
And it did, in the sense that I think in two ways. First of all, I don't think those people would have sued me or the national broadcaster if I had just been a regular bloke in a suit. They would have thought, this is just some gay activist, and it just would have passed on. But they thought, who is this fucking guy in a dress? That's what they thought. Mm-hmm. We're not going to let this guy in a dress talk to us like that because they just saw me as an entertainment silliness. Yes.
Well, they got more than they bargained for.
Yeah. Well, I think history has shown don't fuck with the guy in a dress. So there was that aspect, and then the other aspect is people often say to me, why did I make that speech in drag? Why didn't I make that speech, dressed as a boy? The real, there's two reasons. One is very boring.
Are you talking about the speech at the theatre?
Yes, the speech at the theatre.
Yes. Which you can see on YouTube?
Yes.
On YouTube,
yes. And that speech saved my ass and all that. I'm glad I did it. But I did it in drag for two reasons. One is just boring reason. I had a show that night, so there's no other reason. But secondly, I'm glad I did for lots of reasons. One, it would have seemed disingenuous of me not to, or dishonest of me not to, because the whole point of the speech is about that. If I had, wimped out in some way, and thirdly, I'm glad because in that case, discombobulating people by my gender expression worked in my favor. It amplified my voice. Mm-hmm. More people listened to that speech and watched that speech because I wasn't dressed as a boy. Mm-hmm. And that's not always the case, but in that case, it amplified my voice. And it, in a weird way, it gave more weight to the words that I was saying because it read as honest. And I think if I'd been a guy in a T-shirt, boring and dull and grey, it wouldn't have had the same effect.
And it had this quite wonderful effect that in a country that is still quite socially conservative, suddenly our leading gay rights activist was Panti Bliss, which seemed quite out of keeping with the social mores, I suppose. And I remember, I don't know if you remember, but you put a letter on your Facebook feed from a man who wrote to you, a gay man who wrote and said, now that you're our leader, I think perhaps it's time to get out of the drag and go back to a masculine gender expression because people won't take you seriously like that.
Yes, and I still get that all the time. Yeah. People are always saying, people can't. I'm not going to listen to a bloke dressed as a woman. And the gays are always at it. After every Pride, you'll get people writing, letters to their local gay magazine or whatever it is, giving out about the drag queens in the Pride parade. Because even the gays want you to dress like everybody else. They want to police your gender expression.
Mm. So it goes both ways then?
Yes, it's a very popular pastime, policing other people's gender expression.
Well, let's talk about that policing because, we had a great chat about hair, about the power of hair.
Oh, I love talking about armpits.
Yes.
My favorite.
Yes, we had a good chat about that. And this sense of being policed. And you described in your book about the evolution about growing your hair and thinking about how you dress. Can you sort of explain that process?
I suppose if I was going to sum it up, it would be that we can be really great feminists and queers in practice, in theory, and then you go to, and you have it all. You have all the egalitarian theory, and you're going to do it, and you're not going to care about the social structure anymore. and you try, and you're actually incredibly embarrassed all the time. And you talk about this too in your speech. You say that like you spent your whole life being the best gay possible, and then sometimes you'd be on the train with a friend and they'll be being so gay that it makes you a bit embarrassed. And it's this internalized sexism and this internalized homophobia that that we really need to work on breaking down. You know, it's not just, you know, it's not as easy as saying, I don't give a shit what anybody thinks, because it's not about what other people think. It's about the way that like your own beliefs and your own brain function, I suppose, has been formed by a society that has made you sexist, racist, homophobic, transphobic, ableist at the most fundamental cognitive level, you know? And so when you decide that you're going to try to act differently, it's not as easy as just being brave, or it's not as easy as just having the will. It's really trying to change your own psychology and just try to clear yourself of this internalized hatred of your own physicality, of your own queerness, of your own, you know, whatever other internalized oppression you have. And yeah, I suppose that would sum up chapter 7 of my book.
But you talked about, I really like the anecdote about
This
how...
is her book. This is her book.
Buy the book.
Coming out soon. I liked how you described, so you grew your hair and then you were covering it up all the time, and then it was like a bold decision to go out in a way that it was visible to everyone. So it was a real process that you had to go through. It wasn't like just one day you woke up and said.
And in fact...
And it was the same for you too, Panty, right? The whole process of...
Yeah, but I think this is much braver.
Yes.
Because I can take this on and off.
Yes.
Whereas if you decide to grow your leg hair and it's summer.
Yeah, and I suppose what I did first was I dressed in a really masculine fashion, and that made it easier because everyone was just like, oh, look, you know, it's a butch lesbian. And then they had a pigeonhole for me, and they were nice and comfortable, and certainly I got less stares and all the rest. But if you dress femme, and you like choose one or two aspects that are masculine, like people take pictures of you like behind their hands on public transport, as if a hand is a huge opaque screen as opposed to a hand like, and you can't see, or like whisper. Like, why would you hold the hand up to your mouth if you're also pointing? That's like, yeah.
Well, I think that is part of that whole thing of, you know, it discombobulates them, because if you just look like a butch lesbian, they think they have a box for you and they're putting you in, so that makes them comfortable. You're in the box right there, marked butch lesbian. But if you confuse them by having hairy legs but you're wearing lipstick, they don't get that. And that's where they start to get confused. And I feel that in a smaller way, because even, you know, I've spent 30 years or something running around like this in public, and you think, well, I'd be totally over all those things. But even what I find myself doing is I'm trying to make other people more comfortable with me. So I know that they'll be more comfortable if they get that I'm on the way to do some sort of show or whatever. So even today, when I was being picked up in the hotel and I had to go walk into the lobby, I find myself acting bigger. Because by acting big, it says to people, I'm not just dressing like this to go shopping. I'm a performer, darling. And they'll get that. You know, the hotel receptionist will understand that better, and she'll be able to put me into the drag queen box rather than guy in a dress, you know, going out, you know, to Tesco. Or whatever your equivalent is, equivalent. So I find myself trying to make other people more comfortable with how I'm dressed, you know, by sort of giving them the box with me.
Yes.
You know what I mean? And I think that's where she's run afoul of people on the underground.
And I think it would be very lax of us if we got through this entire conversation without mentioning Judith Butler. So I think I will. And she says this in her kind of original seminal essay about gender performativity. She says that we'll accept a drag queen on stage, but when we won't accept someone cross-dressing next to us on the bus, because there's this idea that that's performance, and when the performance comes into our real-world existence, suddenly we're being asked to think about it all as performance. And that's really threatening to our ideas of ourselves, to our identities, to our safe, cozy ideas of who men are, who women are, and who we ourselves are.
And I think that's exactly right, because what I always say about, you know, drag queens is that we carry the stage with us. by which I mean everyone recognizes this as a performance, and that's why, you know, the hair is bigger and all of that stuff. We're carrying this stage constantly. So if you're in a nightclub, you know, even if the drag queen's not literally on the stage, even if she's just standing by the bar or she's in the cab on her way, in a sense she's carrying the stage with her, because we all recognize that. The problem is when the drag queen doesn't have the stage with her and she's just a bloke in a dress on the underground, you know, that's when people get upset by it.
And I think this might be a nice point at which to mention that the Quebec government is currently proposing a law that states that if you want to have a gender reassignment, you need to have lived as the opposite sex for minimum of 2 years continuously before they'll consider doing that. And I think what myself and Panty are talking about points out why that's a really bad idea, because, you know, there are repercussions to dressing and to acting outside of the role that people expect for your sex, often violent repercussions. Judith Butler again talks about a young boy who was thrown over a bridge and killed for having an effeminate walk. And so we're, at the moment, this proposed law is asking trans people to put themselves in a lot of danger and a lot of personal discomfort to have their gender identities recognized.
Well, what don't you think it's kind of disheartening that we're still putting so much energy, given some of the progress that has been made, very significant progress in Western society, we're still putting so much energy into worrying about shaving your legs and what we wear. I mean, do you think we're ever going to, you know, move past that, where it no longer is something that we spend a lot of time thinking about?
No.
I hope not. I love beauty. I love appearances. I love the aesthetic.
But where will be boxing people, I guess, and do you see progress happening?
Well, I mean, I think if you look all around the world, in every culture, beauty in their own interpretations of it is incredibly important in every culture. And in every culture, you know, there are women scarring themselves or men adding bits to their other bits or whatever it is. You know, that's an innate human thing. So we're always going to have that. But not every culture is obsessed with the demarcations between what a man can do and what a woman can do, as we are. And for example, the Philippines has just introduced legal recognition of a third gender. And there are other cultures that have similar things. And I would say that 3 isn't enough anyway. I mean, I just, you know, we're just so hung up on it. And it's much more fun to be less hung up on it. Now, some people are totally and entirely comfortable in the gender they were given at birth, and that's wonderful for them and great, you know. But I don't know, a panoply, a rainbow is just so much more fun.
I remember when Emma Watson did the speech in front of the UN, which was trying to galvanize men to speak up on women's issues. And the Daily Mail did the whole page about how she was wearing a beautiful dress and what she looked like. And it was really, you know, in a way of putting, they didn't speak about her speech at all, of putting her kind of, I felt, in her place, that she was still about being fashionable and ignoring what she said. So, I mean, to what extent do you think it is about kind of silencing the voices and making you just about what you look like and not really what you're saying?
Yeah, I mean, it's really damaging that we judge women so much on what they look like in this society. And absolutely, focusing on what Emma Watson was wearing rather than what she was saying in that circumstance is incredibly disempowering. And yes, it's a way of putting women in their place. I don't know if you saw the Amy Poehler and Tina Fey Oscar speech lately, but they were talking about how a particular male actor had to, you know, put on makeup for 2 hours every day in order to perform his role. And Tina Fey said, just by comparison, I spent 3 hours getting ready today to play the role of human woman. And you know, that is a reality for a lot of women. The amount of time that they're expected to put into creating a socially acceptable facade of femininity so that they won't be judged harshly is debilitating. And if you don't do it, right, especially if you used to do it before, but if you stop doing it or if you don't do it, and you get up and you make a speech about feminism, what you get is, well, you couldn't get a man anyway, you're so ugly. And if you do it, what you get is, well, it's easy for her to say because she's pretty, and you know, the only reason anyone's even listening to her is because of what she looks like. So it's it's used to silence you from either direction. If you don't meet the standard, you're too ugly to speak. And if you're attractive, the only reason you could possibly be there is because of how attractive you are. So it's, yes, absolutely, it's a way of silencing women. And, I think there can be a conception of feminism as being anti-beauty, and it's not. Bell Hooks has a wonderful section in Feminism is for Everybody, where she talks about the need to move away from these patriarchal beauty standards and to redefine beauty in a feminist way, in individual ways, in ways that acknowledges spectrums of gender. I might be putting a few words into Bell Hooks' mouth here, but certainly she talks about the need for alternative ways of appreciating beauty. And I'm completely on board with most things that Bell Hooks says, but especially that, because you don't have to fit this patriarchal norm of beauty in order to be beautiful. In fact, when I look at the incredible array of gender expression in this incredible city and in this incredible university, I'm just amazed at the kinds of beauty that people create for themselves in different body shapes, with different face types, with many different hues of hair. We don't have to box ourselves into a limiting idea of what it is to be feminine in order to be beautiful.
But makeup helps.
Well, so I noticed that you mentioned you brought the boy clothes for afterwards. Yeah. When you're out as Rory, do you find the reaction are you experiencing the world in a very different way? How people are reacting to you?
Oh, entirely differently. Now, I'm not going to even suggest for an instant that I'm somehow experiencing the world as a woman.
Yes,
I'm not, because I'm not reading it. But it's entirely, when you're dressed this way, you attract attention. People interact with you in a different way. I'm actually quite a dull person as a boy, and I'm much more likely to be in the corner observing. But when you look like this, you stand out, and people interact with you in an entirely different way. You can't even compare them.
But in one of your a TED talk that you gave, you talked about checking yourself on the side of the road. Did you mean when you were as Panty, or?
Well, actually, that's not in the TED talk. That's in the Abbey theatre speech, and that. Yes, well, that's actually one of the interests about the differences between the LGBT community and others, is that no gay person listening to that speech, every gay person would have understood that I meant sort of as a boy, that this is a daytime real story. I'm telling you about the afternoon when I'm going to the supermarket. Whereas in the auditorium that night, there was, say 500 people. There were 500 theatre goers at the National Theatre. Most of them were not the kind that are used to drag queens, whatever. And they, at first, assumed that I was telling a story in drag, and they laughed at it first, because I asked, how did the story is, I was telling a story of being standing at a pedestrian crossing when people drive by in a car and call me a faggot and throw something at me. And the auditorium and the people in the auditorium, they laughed at first because they thought, well, of course they knew you were a faggot, you were dressed like that. They thought I was a drag queen, but I wasn't. And most gay people listening to that story would have understood, because gay people understand the relationship between the drag performer and the performance. So in that level, yes, and I think I would have been less likely for people to throw something at a drag queen. People are a little intimidated by drag queens in some way. But a boy that they read as a faggot, they're not intimidated by that at all.
Well, you talked about how oppressive that is.
Well, I think it's obviously when somebody throws something at you or screams abuse at you, that's oppressive, obviously.
Yes.
But what I'm
even in the subtle
what I'm
forms
concerned
of
about
oppression,
is the everyday, the day-to-day things. I think there is this general assumption that it's fine to be a woman or to be gay or all that, because you're not being murdered in the street generally. But what I'm concerned about is the smaller things that you have to adjust for or make up for on an every day. And there's countless things, from not being able to hold hands in the street to many other tiny things, to not being acting too gay on the train, all of those things. And I think LGBT people are so used to those minor adjustments, so used to reading those situations and checking for your safety, or even just to make sure that you're not going to be ridiculed and made fun of, or whatever. We're so used to doing that. It's so part of our lives that we don't even notice ourselves doing it at all. We just think it's normal. We think that's what everybody does. But it's not normal, and it's not what everybody does. And I think you do sort of get to a point in your life, certainly I did, where I just like, I don't have the energy anymore for all that, so I just gave up caring.
But isn't that also what women do? Constantly thinking about how will I look in this outfit? How am I being perceived? Am I safe on the street? I mean,
I certainly thought, like, listening to that speech, that was probably a moment that a lot of women could relate to. And I saw, like, in the comments, I know you're not supposed to read the YouTube comments, but I always do. And yeah, there was a few women who responded saying, like, that's the feeling I get when I'm at a pedestrian crossing or somewhere similar, and it's a car of guys going past because they might sexually harass me. And, it's a different kind of oppression, but absolutely, I haven't had a milk carton thrown out the window at me, but I've had an egg thrown out the window of a car at me walking up the hill to Royal Holloway, where I did my PhD in London, by a car full of boys. And I think probably a lot of women and a lot of LGBTQ people in this room and elsewhere can relate to that experience of just walking past a group of people who you're worried might oppress you because you've experienced it before. Am I allowed to derail slightly and ask Panty a question that I would like to ask Panty? You talked about the idea that Rory is a quiet, boring person. I disagree that Rory's boring. I think he's very nice. And that Panty is the more flamboyant and vivacious. And I suppose this is in part a talk about identity and gender identity. And I wonder how much you conceive of Panty as being part of your gender identity.
It's a funny one because people, for example, journalists always want to know, am I going to be interviewing Rory or Panty? They always want to know that. And I always say, it doesn't matter. You just ask the questions, and then afterwards you can decide what you want. Because to me, we're the same person.
Who you heard from,
yeah. Yeah, like, this isn't a character. I'm not playing a character. I'm not, Dame Edna Everage. This is who I am. I'm just expressing it slightly differently. And even when I'm, on stage performing in that sense, it's still me. It's just certain aspects of me are magnified by the makeup and all of that. And maybe some other parts of the boring daytime Rory have been dampened down a bit. But it's the same person, it's the same essence or whatever. I'm just presenting it to you differently. But the power of that presentation is so much that other people read you as two entirely different people. And people often accuse me of using a different voice when I'm in drag. And I don't. This is my voice. They're hearing it differently because it's coming out of this. And I can prove to people it's the same voice by just recording myself and whatever. But they refuse to believe that. They even hear me differently because of how I'm visually presented.
I remember I interviewed some mothers who were called themselves feminists and had daughters and were really struggling with that the princess culture. They were trying to ban pink, have no princess clothes, and in the end, they had to give up because they would go to princess parties and they would watch the Disney movies. But I mean, that's kind of the flip side. One of the mothers said, why would I make being a girl or that sense of girliness also be a negative thing? Like, you can go too far the other way. You talked about that a bit in your book.
No, I think after every little girl's birthday party, you should gather up all of the dolls that she's just been given and throw them into a feminist bonfire and watch her tears and say, that's good for you. This is for equality.
Here's a torch, now start welding.
Play with your tractor. Absolutely. There's a number of really interesting books on how parents treat their children around toys and stuff like that. And one that I really like is Cordelia Fine's Delusions of Gender. And she's a neuropsychologist, and she looks at the way that parents treat their children and how children learn gender identity, basically. And she found that even really lefty, liberal parents who considered themselves to be feminists actually used a lot of non-verbal cues to encourage their children to play with the correct toys for their gender. Children are more attuned to verbal cues than they are to actual language. So they might have been at a certain age. And so when they were told, you know, they might have been said, oh yeah, their parents might have said, oh yes, go ahead, play with the tractor, Sally, but the body language would have been different. And this was particularly pronounced for when boys went to play with girls' toys. So much like, you know, I can dress like a man and experience little social opprobrium, yet it's much harder for men to dress like women because they'll experience more social opprobrium. This was replicated in the way that parents interacted with their children's toy preferences. So if a little boy was going for a Barbie, Mummy and Daddy might have been keeping stum, but they were going...
Yeah.
Yes.
You know, that body language was there. And so children learn these gender identities very early. So it's not, and there's a sexism in it, absolutely. It replicates the gender hierarchy in that we'll allow little girls to play with the tractor, but we won't allow little boys to play with the Barbie. And so the answer is not banning pink. There's nothing bad about pink. Pink is a perfectly pleasant colour. It's not banning Barbie, although I don't particularly like Barbies for other reasons. It's about encouraging children in a genuine way to engage with the playthings that they want to engage with. And you're not going to be able to protect them from, like, you know, put them in a little bubble where they're kind of protected from this tsunami of pink plastic beautification and domestication training tools anyway. Mm-hmm. So, like, just give them the tools to interact with the sexism from a young age. Like, let them know, you know, some people think that boys shouldn't play with dolls. Isn't that silly? Some people think that you shouldn't play with that tractor. Isn't that silly? And then just let them be kids and stop worrying them. There's plenty of time for them to be feminists later.
Yeah. But like, and also, I wouldn't want the world to become this kind of place where everyone is this brown sludge. You know, it's fun to be able to dress up and perform genders differently and all of that too. And that's not something you're never going to have to worry about, because you can have as many Panty and Emers in the world as you want. We're not going to make that happen. That's not going to happen. There will always be, you know, a difference. And sometimes that difference is fun and enjoyable. But you asked me, you sort of mentioned that I have a bag of boy clothes out there. And that's because, you know, oh, this is going to be a long day, and we were doing some other things earlier, and then we were going to go out and eat something later. And I was thinking, oh, God, I will be so uncomfortable, you know, if I'm still in drag while I'm trying to eat a steak and you know, flirt with waiters or something, you know. If I'm in these shoes still, I'll just be uncomfortable and I won't be able to relax. Because, you know, being a woman or performing a woman is so fucking uncomfortable, you know. Like I always say, I'm so glamorous, I'm constantly in pain, you know. I'm so glamorous, I'm practically disabled. Yes. Because I can't walk very far. I'm always, oh, slow down, you know. I'm cold because I don't have a proper jacket on, you know. My head's too hot because I have this giant nylon hat on. You know, there's just all of these things. It becomes, you know, and even in a smaller way, you're worried about smudging the lipstick that you spent so long putting on, and you lose the curl in your hair. You know, all of that stuff, it's just a constant nagging worry and a constant
distraction.
Discomfort. Yes. And men, for the most part, don't have to worry about that. So, yes, so later on, if we're going to go out and relax and have something to drink and everything, I'll put the jeans in a bag, you know, and bring a wipe off.
If it makes you feel any better, I also have wipe offs, and I also have a bag of boy clothes that I'm going to change back into after this interview.
Well, I mean, because isn't that part of the problem, that those that gender performance filters into how we see roles in the real world, like our attitude toward, you were talking about boys not playing with dolls, and our attitude towards stay-at-home dads, and how conflicted we are about when women earn more than men. That's a big discussion going on right now. So, I mean, do you think that if we could release ourselves from those boxes, some of those roles would also start to dissipate as well? Is there a connection there?
Yes.
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 Expand.
I think that's, like, the way in which we perform our gender roles uphold and props up a gender binary, props up the illusion that men and women are very psychologically different creatures who must perform different social roles and who have different social values. And it's, you know, it's a symbolic system that supports those beliefs, those erroneous sexist beliefs. And so if you start fucking with that system, like, then you're fucking with the system. You know, you might just be changing your gender presentation, but you're undermining people's deeply held beliefs that men and women are incredibly psychologically different creatures that should fulfill different social roles and have social values. So absolutely, I think, like, gender fuck for equality.
Well, and that's one of the points you make in your book, and of course the theme of your book, Panty, is if you're thinking about these issues, to go out and do something that will defy the gender performance that's expected of you. So what would be your challenge then to the audience before we go to questions? If they're going to go home tonight and think about it, what should the men and the women, what should they do to sort of challenge that gender performance?
The men should go home and bottom really hard. Montreal's about the only time where I don't have to explain that to anybody. All men should do drag at some point.
Yes.
Gay, straight, whatever. All men should do drag. They should learn how uncomfortable it is to be the woman that you're expecting women to be. You know.
That's great advice. Yeah.
Yeah, and I don't mean, you know, wear a pair of lady sneakers and, you know, and juicy tracksuit. I mean, do the whole thing and understand how much you're asking of women all the time. And then the next time you see some female politician who's looking a bit, you know, not painted up so much, and you kind of think, God, the state of her, well, then you'll think, okay, well, fine, she's more important things to be doing than spending 2 hours, you know, strapping herself into a pair of Spanx and a sandal with a horribly painful heel. So all men should do drag, proper, full-on drag, at least once, and just from that simple, actual physical perspective, work out how fucking uncomfortable it is.
Well, that's a really good answer. Mine's not going to be as good. Here's some little fun things that you can do that I like to play with. You know when you get out of the shower and, like, if you're a girl, you just, like, make yourself a little dress that covers your breasts and your thighs, and you just do that because you've been told that that's what girls do when they get out of the shower, and you've been doing it all your life. And maybe you'll make a little turban, a little towel turban for your head. And, like, why do we have to do that? Why do we have to cover our breasts, like, even in the bathroom when we get out of the shower? Are they so asexual that we're just going to spend all day jiggling them in the mirror and not get anything done? You know, so I think, like, for girls, maybe tie that towel around your waist and be like, hey, this is an okay way, you know, this is a nice way to wear a towel. I'm going to potter out into the kitchen and shock my flatmates. And if you're a boy, why not try creating yourself a little towel dress and see what that feels like? And I've had boys tell me that they don't do it because they don't have any breasts to keep them up, but this is bollocks because I don't have any breasts to keep them up. And it works just fine. And there's something, I know it's little and I know it doesn't sound political, but there's something incredibly weird about inhabiting a different towel space than the one that you've been inhabiting all your life. So that is my challenge to everyone in the audience. Go home tonight and after your shower, wear your towel differently.
All right, I think we're going to open up the conversation to some audience questions. Thank you so much, guys. We're going to ask people to come forward.
It's an egg.
So we want to get through as many questions as possible. So if you could just go right to your question and not do a preamble, that would be really great, and that will make room for people behind you to also ask their questions. So we'll call this microphone 1.
Hi,
go ahead.
Erin. You mentioned you asked a question about how we have ideas about gender and how they feed into other parts of our life. And so my question is, what do you think about uniforms in high schools? Given that schools are these institutional purveyors of social mores, and uniforms are implicitly telling students, well, this is the way a girl should dress, this is the way a guy should dress, this is appropriate, this is not. What are your thoughts on that prescriptiveness?
You go.
I mean, I went to a school with uniforms, and the year after I left, they decided that girls could wear trousers after all, which was nice of them. And yeah, absolutely. I think forcing children to dress in a way that upholds the gender binary in institutions teaches them that there is something fundamentally different between boys and girls, to the extent that they need to be costumed differently to arrive at school. And I think probably gender neutral uniforms are a good idea, but probably like we should just trust our kids to wear what they want to school.
They weren't sure about that. Well, you know, my mother would always say, oh, you know, she always wanted us to have a uniform because she didn't have to worry about, be easier, and, you know, rich kids and poor kids and all that stuff. I was in Australia once, and all these kids, you know, were standing at this bus stop, and they were mixed, you know, boys and girls, and they were wearing the same uniform. And I just thought, God, Australia is so brilliantly practical sometimes. They were just all in kind of track pant kind of vibe. And I was just, God, that's, you know, girls and boys dress so alike nowadays and sometimes anyway. So I was thinking, that's the way to go. Like, who cares? Anyway, the girls, but still, it's just one of the girls had found little ways to femme up their outfits. You know, they were rolling them up differently and all of that stuff. So yeah, there's a battle on your hands. You can give them the same thing to wear, but.
And the rich kids always find a way to show that they've got slightly better runners than you, don't they? Like, you know, yeah, we're all wearing exactly the same regulation socks, but mine are Gucci.
The problem is, I know a lot of you know people who would have been gay boys who would have definitely preferred the girls' outfit anyway. So they wouldn't have been happy even if they'd be given the same. Can't please those gays.
Microphone number 2.
Hi, Panty. Hi, Emer.
Hi, Michael.
Hi, Michael.
Okay, so Panty, earlier you said there's no way that anyone in their right minds would mistake all this for a woman. That can be seen as a bit transphobic. So I just wanted to know if you could back up a little bit, and because there are many different ways of experience of being
No, I
putting
understand
forth yourself
exactly
as
what
a
you're
woman
saying.
or a man.
But it's like later on when I actually said talking about trans people who are lucky enough to pass, meaning how our society thinks a woman should look. And that's what I meant in this case, that this is not how the general public thinks a woman is going to look. But, I totally get you there.
Thanks for clarifying.
Yeah, no, thank you, Michael. I love you.
Oh, microphone 1 there.
Oh, I'm just holding it to pass around.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Cool. Hi, both
Hi.
of you.
Hi, Isabel.
Hey.
These are all my students.
So, a strong thread in this conversation has been the relationship between gender performance and sexual identity and how people perceive that. And there seems to be a link between acting masculine and being a lesbian and acting effeminate and being a queer person. But as you're seeing our relationship to gender evolve, do you think we're moving away from these stereotypes? Do you think there's a reason to cling to them? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I say yes, in general we are, and I think you see a much broader kind of a gender expression in the LGBT community now as well. And I think that's partly because in the past, I think gay people felt almost pressured to choose a side of the fence, in a sense. And I think it's healthier now. People can feel, but the gay community really still has a problem with that, especially the boys. My God, anybody who's ever looked at Grindr will see the whole mask for mask thing. It's just so annoying and disappointing. But actually, one thing about it that I sort of miss is the demise of the butch lesbian. I've always felt very comfortable in the company of butch lesbians. Lots of my good friends are butch lesbians of the old school. And I'm just, I don't know, whatever it is, I like that in a woman, and they like a big drag queen. So, and younger lesbians, it's becoming a rarer and rarer breed. The classic butch lesbian, and I think that's more natural. But I miss my good butch dykes. Yeah.
I wonder if there isn't something to say there about sign systems and our sexual needs being communicated through sign systems, and us all having an inbuilt or learned ability to read sign systems. I'm going to answer this question by talking about me. I always find that I tend to go from like shaved head to long hair to shaved head to long hair. And I always find that after a certain tiny point, like suddenly I stop getting attention from women, and like sexual attention from women, and I start getting sexual attention from men. And like it's really, I usually go through a week where I'm like, whoa, like what's going on this week? Why are all these guys? And it's like, oh, the hair. It's at a you know, at a suitably straight, it's at a suitably hetero length. I'm straight again. And I do think there's something about, you know, if you are looking for a mate, and, you know, in a very practical sense, if you're looking for a mate and you're a gay person, that like using signs that can be read by other gay people to like, to signal that is very useful. And similarly, like if you are a hetero girl and you're looking for like, you know, a kind of a conservative masculine partner, shaving all your hair off is not a very sensible strategy. And yeah, so I wonder if part of the reason that people might have expressed their identity through, you know, through kind of masculine signs, if female and feminine signs, if masculine, might not be something to do with semiotics and signs and wanting to be read in certain ways, a kind of a conscious manipulation of those signs.
I agree with that entirely, and I think where you really see that is on Grindr, that whole masculine business and all that. I think in the past, gays needed to sort of telegraph out, I'm a big flaming queen, because that's how you met each other. It wasn't as easy in the old days to find other gays. So you flamed out, and everybody subtly understood who you were, and you could start hooking up with that person. And if you go and look on Grindr now, all these people are so obsessed with feminine gays. I'm looking for I'm a masculine, I'm looking for a masculine. And I'm always thinking, where are these super feminine gays? I spend my life in fucking gay venues and all that, and I can count on the fingers of one hand the ones that the handful that I know that are super feminine. Where are these feminine gays that everyone is so terrified of? They hardly exist. There's me and Michael, and that's about it. And, you know, we're few and far between, you know, and yet everyone is all the gays are so terrified of them. And that's because they're still living in this world, they've read the gay community in the way, you know, from 40 years ago, when I think that was much more prevalent. They were butch and femme, and there was a reason for that to find each other. And now that we don't need that, gays have just blended more, and they're just, their gender expression is more natural to them, I think. Bummer for us, Michael.
Hi.
Hi.
Yes, hi.
Hi. I concur with you, Patty, about Philippines. In Southeast Asia, especially with clothing and dressing, like sarongs are being used, and men and women wear them, and they are really colorful, and you know. And I think with globalization and with the Western culture being indoctrinated into the other cultures, the blacks and the grays are more prominent now in male dressing, because in the past, male used to wear pink and blue and colorful shirts, and the batik is one of the beautiful fabrics that are being used all over Southeast Asia by both men and women. And there was no...
Can you ask your question, please?
Oh, sorry. Yeah. Yes?
I agree entirely, yeah. Well, yeah. I think the Southeast Asians have a better understanding that there aren't just two boxes for everybody.
Yeah. But do you think that's what's happening in globalization? That I guess she's suggesting that our Western uptightness and
we're importing
conservatism is being rather than the other way.
Yeah, no, I think that's absolutely true, and not just in Southeast Asia. I see it in other countries where they had no problems with pink before, and now they suddenly do.
Yes, like 30, 40 years ago, men would come to the office dressed in flowery, colorful shirts without a blink of an eyelid. Yep. But now they're all made to dress white and suits and, you know, the typical Western...
For all their Skype conference.
And I would definitely blame our culture there for influencing yours badly. But in another way, I think it's also a modernity thing. Like in the just one example, in the 1950s in Dublin, there was a very famous gay couple, and And they lived very open, flamboyant gay lives. One of them wore makeup a lot. They were big in the theatre community. One of them founded one of the big theatres there. The other was a very famous actor. They were known throughout the city and throughout the country as the boys. And the fact that they were flaming and one wore a cape and all that didn't really bother people, because people were so unaware, in a sense, of homosexuality in that sense, that people just read it as sort of artistic or flamboyant. If you really sat them down and said, well, you understand, they're fucking each other, right? They probably would have thought, oh, yeah. But it just wasn't part of the culture. Whereas now everyone knows exactly what gay people are, knows exactly what they're doing. And so it's impossible to, in a sense, to live that openly in secret anymore. And so in some ways, we are policing ourselves harder now than we were 50 years ago, just because we're more aware.
Well, and it's also the outlier, acceptance of an outlier and the nervousness of the mainstream when it becomes. Well, microphone 2, yes?
Good evening. I guess I have a globalization question too. Maybe it's a function of being born and bred in Montreal and being part of an academic community, but I find a lot of the images that you are both talking about not very discombobulating. And something that worries me more and more in terms of acceptance of gender appearance and so forth is the way the West is treating veiled women. And I think that's really what's discombobulating us these days. And I just wonder if the two of you or either of you had any thoughts about that, any insights into it. You know, our government a year ago tried to, provincial government tried to put the kibosh on allowing women in certain jobs from expressing their combination of religious and gender identity. So it's a very important question here in particular, but I think in general. So I just wonder if you had any thoughts or insights into that.
I mean, I arrived here when the Charter of Values was being proposed and debated, and I was like, but I'm moving to Canada, where people are free, and, you know, there's social equality, and suddenly they're trying to ban women from wearing what they want to wear to work. And it was really disconcerting. I suppose I can I can sum up my attitude to women wearing burqas, hijabs, or mini skirts in a kind of a riff on the principle of the freedom of speech, which is what I've termed the principle of freedom of clobber, which is I might not like what someone's wearing, but I'll defend to the death their right to wear it. And it's absolutely shocking that we can't see past our cultural blinkers to acknowledge the rights of women to wear what they want to wear. And I'd like to draw attention to the performative protest of one of our academics here in Concordia, Nora Jaffries from the history department, who wore a hijab to work every single day until the charter was rejected.
And obviously I agree, because how could I possibly start policing what people want to wear? Although I'd be really good at it.
Hi there. There was a lot of emphasis on the idea of like people's expression of their gender identity, but what do you think about the labels that people like to put on themselves? I know that in the young LGBTQ community, especially in Montreal, there's a lot of emphasis on like, oh, I'm genderqueer, oh, I'm agender, oh, I'm all of these list of things. And do you think that that's helpful or not so helpful in like people trying to express themselves?
I think it's probably helpful. I think it's also just where we are in an evolution. I think labels can be very important at a particular time in someone's life, and especially in where we are in this conversation, where we're at a period where we're trying to include people and where we're trying to get a handle on all of these things, and you need labels to be able to talk about these things, and it's important to be able to talk about them. I think in 20 years' time, we'll be less hung up on all the labels, and so will the individual people. But we're not at a point yet where we've had all the conversations. And you need to have labels to be able to talk about them. I know what you mean, though, that sometimes it can seem so confusing. There's so many labels, and am I going to say the wrong thing, and all that. But I think especially in an academic institution, you need to get over it. So there's lots of labels, learn them.
Perfect.
Hi there.
Hi.
Hi, Panty, if I'd known your love of butches, I would have put a suit on.
I was just thinking I love her. I was just thinking as you stepped up, love her already.
Strategic error.
You're probably racist of me in some way, but I'm loving you.
Okay, but my question wasn't to ask you on a date, unfortunately.
I would have said yes. I'm really easy. I'm so easy.
Emer, I'm going to contact you. Okay.
I'll get her number for you, Gillian. I'll get her number for you.
Gillian, you know absolutely. Is there anyone you don't know in this room?
One or two.
Okay, so this is my question. Well, okay, I'm a mother. I have triplets. 2 are boys and 1 are a girl. 1 is a girl. And I'm startled by how easily people gender these toddlers, including myself. So I'm like, where are the words where you go, oh, you're such a good it? Like, so I'm just curious, because you were talking about, like, okay, not to dismiss the boys from playing with the princess, which I totally don't. One of my sons loves to put on a pink hat and run around with a teapot that sings. Sorry?
He's a gaby.
Yes, hopefully. But yeah, I'm just like, I've heard that in Sweden they have these great programs, but have you heard of any progress in Canada or Ireland with this kind of gender neutral?
Oh my God, we're so far away from it in Ireland.
Wow.
There's no Irish word for the, no.
No, and I wouldn't get too hung up on yourself, because it's so difficult. The world is set up to divide your kids into boys and girls. And I think as long as you're aware of that, you're doing a good job. And I wouldn't beat myself up over it at all. And you can always just say, oh, what a good little mechanic.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's good, yeah.
So, yeah, it's a tough one. And I do it all the time. And I've spent my life, playing different genders. And I still, as soon as my first question I want to ask about every baby is it a boy or a girl? Because I want to be able to comfortably discuss the child. And it's so stupid. Why do I care so much? But there's just something, I want to, is it a boy or a girl? And does she want to be a doctor? That's what my mother wants to know.
I mean, I don't have children yet, but I do have a cat. And her
They're
name...
almost the same thing. To a lesbian.
Yeah. And the cat's name is Frida Catlow. And when the cat arrived in a duffel bag, because their previous owner didn't have a cat thing, Frida Katlow's little head popped out. And I thought, oh no. Because Frida Catlow has like a mustache and goatee that's kind of sliding off her face, like if Dali had kind of painted an inebriated furry Stalin. That would be my cat. And I was kind of like, I knew it was a girl cat, and then the rest of her slithered out of the bag, and she was like a really fat cat. I have this really fat, ugly cat. And I just was so distressed by her facial markings, and was putting her on this skinny cat food that I was paying a fortune for. And I was gendering my cat, okay? You're gendering your children. They have a gender. This is a cat. Let's presume that cats don't actually have genders. They have biological sex, but they probably don't have a whole set of norms around how they think that they should express that. And so I suppose what I'm trying to get to is if I'm gendering my cat, don't beat yourself up over gendering your children.
Can somebody please make the pussy joke before I
do? Well, I think that's all the questions. So on that note, thank you so much, Panty and Emer, for coming. That was a wonderful chat. So Emer's book, Girls Will Be Girls, is out in a week. Is that right?
Yes.
Coming out in a week. And Panty will be signing the book Woman in the Making after...
I believe
right
so.
Around now, yes. Excellent. All right, thank you again.